herd, a herd that hates. They play us like a sucker.
making me never leave. When it doesn't get no serious, life that
So first of all, a reminder, there's no parking on this main street here. Everyone should be parking in the south lower lot. If you haven't checked in and received your Braver Angels lanyard, please check in at the Todd Ware Center. So you might have checked in for housing. That's a separate check-in. So you need to go to the Braver Angels check-in to get your lanyard.
I can tell you that Starbucks coffee shop a little bit north of here is open from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. each of the days that you're here, except Sunday. Sunday it will close at 2. I'll also add that the Carthage staff is very happy that y'all are here because usually that's not open in the summer. So thank you. And the Red Zone, which is a convenience store and also has some snacks and stuff, it's that way in the student union. So both of those things have the same hours, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
All right. Any questions about any of your room items, towels, linens, etc., go to the information desk there at the Todd Ware Center. And finally, as we're getting into the heart of everything, some people might have questions about where something is. A reminder about the volunteers who have the American flag stickers on their lanyards. And also on the screens all around campus, there's going to be a slideshow with the daily schedule and room assignments and things like that going around. So check those out for more information. Do we have any other announcements?
A room assignment announcement and an apology for last night. I hope that those of you who were looking for the documentaries found it in the Student Union auditorium upstairs. That's an error on me. The correction for today, or the clarification for today, is the 10:30 session of Can We Have a Better Pandemic? It is definitely 10:30 a.m. in the Straz atrium north of here, okay? And there's some ambiguity in your printed materials, but if you're signed up for the Better Pandemic session, it's at 10:30 in the Straz atrium.
Okay. I think that's it, right? Okay. All right, Cameron, so how are you doing this morning? How was your night?
Well, what a night we had. The euphoria of our meeting even carried me through the low points of the debate.
Were there a few of those?
There were a few of those. Did you watch the debate, Matt?
I was thinking to myself last night when I made the comment about understandably not feeling like watching the debate. I did step in for a little bit here, and it was amazing to see the room full of Reds, Blues, and others together, respectfully watching the debate. But I spent most of the evening watching those incredible Lincoln documentaries that you recommended, and that was great. And I do know with those low points in the debate, and then that some people were kind of feeling a little down about this is our choice. And then watching that Lincoln debate, and then this morning walking around, and it's a little bit of a dreary day. Yesterday was so beautiful. We had the sun shining. It was a wonderful day with the lake. And then today it's drizzling and overcast. And I got reminded of something. So first of all, I was reminded, last night I felt a little left out. So when you got introduced from Kenosha, there was a lot of cheers. When we had our other officers from Silver Springs and Brooklyn, New York.
And Detroit was mentioned. Everything got a whoop.
They got applause, but it seems no one knows about Pesodum, Illinois. So who's here from a small town? Who's from a small town? Okay, we got a few. Great. So yeah, I know that. But what I was reminded of is we do have not my small town, but the one where I went to high school right next to us has a little bit of Lincoln history to it. It was actually the last spot in Illinois where Lincoln stopped on his way to D.C. to become the president. The nation was already on the verge of the Civil War. The South was already starting to secede. And so there was kind of a gloom over this trip. And Lincoln stepped off the station platform there in Tolono, Illinois, where I went to high school, and said, "I'm leaving you on an errand of national importance, attended as you are aware with considerable difficulties. But let us believe, as some poet has expressed it, behind the cloud, the sun is still shining."
Thanks, Matt. I feel the sun shining in here. And actually, my primary feeling last night was gratitude that I get to be in this company while experiencing the difficulties of what Monica Guzman called out there.
Very true. And so I have to ask a question, Cameron. So we talked last night about bridging the differences and other perspectives. So are you checking out the red side of things here today?
I'm so glad you noticed, Matt. I'm checking out your sartorial choices too. There's no eagle today. It says Rise for America. This shirt I recognize. This is a cultural reference that I get.
So I've seen a few of them. So Rise for America, I think. How many people were in Gettysburg last year? Okay, great. Glad to have you back. So Rise for America was the theme for last year's Gettysburg National Convention. And so the question is, so that's why we were there in Gettysburg. So I think one of the things we want to figure out is why are we here this year?
And that is the title of today's opening plenary. Why are we here? And to begin that,
yeah, to begin, we're going to get to know each other a little better. The speaker, or the chair, would like to call Bill Doherty, Braver Angels co-founder and creator of the Braver Angels workshop approach, to the stage.
All right. Whoa. Thank you. Whoa. Okay, another applause for small towns, okay? So we're going to inject a little energy here by meeting each other, and this is the process we're going to use. I'm going to ask everybody to, when I say go, I'm going to describe it all, to find somebody with a different color lanyard and pair up with them for 4 minutes to introduce yourself and say why you came. And then I'm at the end of the 4 minutes, so people are already checking each other out. These are the people who had a dance at the prom, you know. People like me just sort of sat there and everybody, but I see these two, yo, and at the end of the 4 minutes, then that pair is going to find another pair for 8 minutes. This is called a 1, 2, 4 total exercise here. So the first is going to give you a moment to think about why you're here. And then you're going to pair up. And then this whistle. This is going to be a lot of noise in here. When I go, kind of lame, wasn't it? Thanks a lot for that. And I'll review the instructions. Okay. The first step, though, because a lot of you are sort of stuck in pews, right? So when I say go, I'm going to want you to move around. Come up here, go around in the back, go everywhere. In other words, spread out, okay? And stand up if you can, so you have some energy. And you're going to find somebody with a different color lanyard. I guess if you're colorblind, what are they? Anyway, ask for help. And so that's going to be for 4 minutes. Introduce yourself. Why? Shh. Oh, yeah, I want everybody to hear the instructions. So introduce yourself, say why you're here. And then when I blow this pathetic whistle, thanks for that. Then what are you going to do then? You're going to find another pair for 8 minutes, and then I'm going to blow the whistle, and then go back to your seats, and then we're going to hear from a few people who would like to speak into the mic about why you came. You got it? So it's going to be quick, high energy. So when I say go, I want you to get up, stand up, move around, and find somebody for 4 minutes, different color, go. What's that? Any other color is fine. Make it free. What? Join a pair just to make a three.
Thank you.
Yeah. Join a pair to make a three. Yeah. Feel free to join a pair to make a three.
Sounds great. Oh,
Okay?
yeah.
Go for it. Everybody who's looking is blue. So join a pair. Make a three. Yeah.
All right.
Even with another blue pill? No. Just join a pair that has. Yeah.
But I very much believe it depends on the school. That's what's missing in our.
Stand.
No.
Find another pair. Go. 8 minutes. Find another pair. Move. You're supposed to. Good to see you.
What do we do in the foursome? Do we just retell our stories?
Yeah, supposed to people sitting in pews.
Yeah, I was just
I'm on comms, videographer, and I was like, the shots right now are.
What's that?
How much time do we got, boss? Okay.
Okay, back to your seats. Back to your seats. Say goodbye to your friends. Say goodbye to your friends. Okay. Hate to. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Say goodbye. Say goodbye. Shh. All right. If somebody could help bring the people from the vestibule in. Shh. Thank you. If one of my whips could get the folks who are in the vestibule, whatever you call that, in, that would be great. Bring them in. Everybody in. Thank you. Shh. Okay. Shh. Thank you. Always hard to break up these new friendships, you know. Okay, great. Shh. So if folks could come in, we'll start when everyone is back in and quiet. So if the folks who are standing in the back could go find a place and stop talking. Don't make me mad. Okay, we'll do the Girl Scout thing. Clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. Clap 3 times if you can hear me. You people in the back, did you hear the claps? Shh. Okay. That worked. Thank you. You were encouraging me to do that. Yeah. It's better than that pathetic whistle, I think. Yes. All right. So we'll spend a few minutes hearing from a few of you who would like to tell us all who you are, why you came, and the color of your lanyard. You know, in a crowd this size, there's 15% of you who are extroverts like me who think other people are dying to hear why you came. And it's a very important thing in the human species that there are some of us who have that belief. Okay, so let's, we're gonna work the room here a little bit. Could we have a hand raised over here? You don't have to be a certified extrovert, but you have to be willing to introduce yourself to the group. Could somebody in this side of the room raise your hand? There we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stacy. I'm from San Francisco.
And you're wearing what?
I'm wearing a blue lanyard. It's my very first Braver Angels experience of any kind.
All right, wow.
So I went right up to my buddy on the stage there and introduced myself, and we had a really nice chat about being a first timer and being someone who's really involved. Thank you for welcoming me. It's been really inspiring so far, and I look forward to getting to know more of you and growing in my bipartisanship.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And
So Bill, if I could, right behind you, Bill.
Is that God speaking? Who is speaking to me here?
You don't need to make me more arrogant than I am.
I'm sorry, I can't tell who is speaking. Oh, it is God. It is God.
I want to go off of something else interesting that Stacy said. Is someone else in our little group, Steve from North Carolina. So Stacy said it was her first Brave Angels event. Steve was a homestay for the bus tour that you guys did in 2017.
Oh, yeah.
So we have the beginning and the most recent here.
Wow. Cool. Thank you. Did you have your hand up? Yeah, go for it.
Like ice cream? Cool. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Trey Carlisle. I am with Music in Common. We curate experiences for people across social divides to find common ground through facilitated conversations and through music. And so we are big fans of what Braver Angels does in building bridges. So when we learned about the conference, we're like, oh, we got to come out and network and connect.
That's great. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So let's go. So Melinda will find somebody.
Hello, my name is Patricia Higgins. I am blue from New Hampshire. I served for 6 years in the New Hampshire legislature and desperately wanted to get out and bury my head in the sand and never hear another piece of political news in my life. Thank you. And then someone invited me to a Braver Angels introduction program, at which I scoffed at first, thinking Pollyanna, bleh. But there was one line in the invitation that said, this experience will be more meaningful if you bring someone along with whom you disagree. That was the clincher for me. I brought someone from the legislature with whom I had disagreed. We continued conversations for a number of weeks, and I saw the importance of going deeper and deeper and deeper to get to the really personal part of it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So somebody else from here. Have we had any reds yet? We have a bunch of blues. Let's hear from a red. Yeah.
Hi, Will. Sure. Will Harwood. I live in Virginia. This is a sort of a newer color from me, but it's been something that I've been feeling for a long time, and it's good to be clear about it. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be so clear with everyone around having the lanyards. I'm here because it was very evident last night for me that I don't have any faith in the leadership, the national leadership that we have that we're looking at, but I do have a lot of faith in us as Americans. And so it's wonderful to be with all of you. I was fanboying a little bit last night when I saw Chris, who is part of the initial Braver Angels documentary, and gave him a hug when I saw him. That's how important I feel the work of this organization and what we're doing. So this is what gives me hope, just by virtue that we're here and we're doing this. And it's the antidote to what I saw last night. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, wonderful. So we're gonna go to the balcony. The balcony. Go for it.
Good morning. My name is Piper Hendricks. I'm with an organization called Stories Change Power, and I'm wearing a white lanyard because we are nonpartisan in our support for advocacy communications. But I wanted to share a bit about our group because we had all the colors.
Just a few seconds on the group, because our exercise is mainly why you're here. Okay, so go for it.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah.
okay.
So why are you here?
I'm here because our organization is focused on supporting more people who want to be effective in advocacy in a way that bridges divides rather than deepening our polarization.
Great, wonderful. We're glad you're here. Thank you. Let's go over here. So my whip is going to find someone. There we go.
Hi everyone, my name is McKenna. I am from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm wearing red today. I am attending University of North Carolina at Wilmington, and I just want to share a little bit. I am here because I'm a student fellow, and if you guys don't know what that is, I was graciously given the opportunity to kind of be an advocate for Braver Angels and what they do on my college campus. And I'm here to further my education and how to be a better student leader and to further my ability as a person to understand every perspective.
Wow. Beautiful. That's our last one. Beautiful.
And the speaker is thanked. We would now like to call our next speaker. His name is Judge Thomas Griffith. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Judge Griffith spent 15 years on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Washington, D.C. Circuit, and he's currently a lecturer at both Harvard and Stanford. He is working with Governor Spencer Cox, who many of you remember speaking at our convention last year. And he's working on holding events in sacred spaces around the country at which governors and other thought leaders emphasize the need to get contempt out of our public discourse. One more thing, Judge Griffiths is also a leader of American Bar Association's Task Force for American Democracy, and he encourages lawyers to be leaders in pushing back against toxic political polarization. Please welcome Judge Thomas Griffith.
Thank you very much. So it was the summer of 1787, July 1787 in Philadelphia, and things weren't going well at the Constitutional Convention. In fact, some of the delegates were packing their bags, ready to throw in the towel and admit defeat. Yet, 6 weeks later, they had succeeded. They had created the Constitution. One popular history called this remarkable turn of events the miracle at Philadelphia. Now, I'm a Christian and I believe in miracles, but miracles are events that defy rational explanation, like Jesus walking on water or being resurrected from the dead. Yet we know exactly what happened to create the Constitution in the summer of 1787, because George Washington told us. In his letter transmitting the Constitution to the Constitutional Congress, he wrote, "This Constitution is the result of a spirit of amity and of that mutual deference and concession which the peculiarity of our political situation rendered indispensable." Amity, mutual deference, concession. Those virtues created the Constitution. They are needed to sustain the Constitution today. The scholar Derek Webb did a deep dive into the proceedings of the convention to better understand what Washington meant. And here's what he found: 3 things. First, the rules of the convention: mandatory attendance, no talking, reading, or speaking while someone held the floor, and no record of how a delegate voted on any particular issue. Those 3 rules combined together assume something vital about the only way our democracy can work. Here it is: that if you get a group of people together who are committed to unity and they listen carefully to one another with respect, they will find a way to act together. Second, it turns out that there was a lot of socializing going on among the delegates. Soon after they arrived in Philadelphia, they formed dinner groups. And these dinner groups weren't along regional or ideological lines, so that a delegate from South Carolina, for example, might be a dinner partner with a delegate from Massachusetts. To paraphrase rather loosely what George Mason of Virginia wrote to his own son, people from New England aren't so bad after all. That's a loose paraphrase. The third thing Derek Webb found is that despite these rules that fostered discussion and the much socializing that created friendships, the single most important factor in creating the Constitution that summer came only when a group of moderates decided that they would work to persuade their colleagues to compromise for the sake of unity, even before they knew the terms of the compromise. Now, that is an awful strategy for negotiation, unless your desire is to put the nation's well-being ahead of your own interest. Now, that is how the Constitution was created in the first place. If we are to be true to the Constitution today, we must do the same. A critical moment in the convention came when, sensing that the convention was on the verge of failure, Gouverneur Morris of Pennsylvania, he would later write the preamble to the Constitution, he gave an impassioned speech that helped turn the tide. As one observer wrote, quote, Morris spoke with eloquence and power on the necessity of union, of partial sacrifices, and temperate discussion, close quote. Unity, compromise, respectful discussion. Is there a better description of the work of better angels? Now, I'm a Christian who practices my faith as a Latter-day Saint. In a recent address to the 16.5 million members of my church, a senior leader of ours, Dallin Oaks, taught that the most important way that any of us can support and defend the Constitution is that, quote, on contested issues, we seek to moderate and to unify. Yuval Levin of the American Enterprise Institute has just published a book that I think is the most important book ever written on the Constitution of the United States. I feel that strongly about it. It's called American Covenant, How the Constitution Unified Our Nation and Can Do So Again. Levin observes that the Constitution creates a structure of government that can only work when majorities and minorities act together. And that requires negotiation, compromise, conciliation. As important as the Constitution is to protecting our individual rights, more important still is that it forces us to find common ground. Its structure, Levin writes, compels us to be a little more accommodating to one another. It gives us practical experience in living and acting together. End of quote. If we are to keep this republic, that is the only way it will happen. May God bless braver angels, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.
And with that, the speakers thanked. The chair would now like to call to the stage Braver Angels co-founder and president, David Blankenhorn, and Braver Angels chief operating officer, Barbara Thomas.
I'm the David of the Barbara and David part. Madam Chairwoman, Mr. Chairman, thank you. My fellow delegates, I'm so honored to be with you. I want to speak to you today about the time we live in, the time we're in as a nation and as an organization. That we live in dark times seems palpable. We recognize this every day, red, blue, independent, so many of us. The sense of heart sickness, the despair, the anger, the worry, the feeling that things in this land we love just aren't right. So, where's the despair coming from? What's underneath it? Who's to blame? What's to blame? I so admire the political philosopher Hannah Arendt, who begins her powerful analysis by telling us what dark times are not. They are not times in which our problems are too large or too difficult to solve. Dark times do not stem from bad or stupid people. I want to say that one more time. Dark times don't stem from bad or stupid people, or from immediate political crises or changing material circumstances. For Arendt, dark times stem from a collapse of public conversation. We can no longer communicate effectively with our fellow citizens about how we can live together as people who have something in common. The result is that we feel overcome by what Arendt calls weird irreality, that form of disorientation, a kind of social vertigo, which occurs whenever people do not feel connected to others, obligated to others, by virtue of a common humanity. Lincoln knew this. He knew that saving the Union depended ultimately on what he called bonds of affection. On the eve of the Civil War he sought to avert, in his first inaugural address, he told the people of the South, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies." In the same address, he said, "I am loath to close," because Lincoln knew that everything depends on keeping the conversation going. Democracy is government by talk. And when the talking ends, the only thing left to advance your argument is force. You just heard from Judge Tom Griffith. Well, he knows it too. In an essay, I like this so much, Tom, Heroes of Unity, he tells us, quote, "Our greatest gift to a divided nation in this present moment of peril consists of strengthening the bonds of affection that are a necessary precondition for constitutional government." Thank you, Tom. Now, what happens to us when civic friendship decays, when social trust evaporates, and when the loss of our ability to talk with each other drags us into that weird irreality? Arendt knew, just as those of us here today know, no longer willing participants in the civic discourse of friendship, people separate into identity groups, often based on real or perceived shared grievances, with each group pitted against the others. Another result is the refusal to compromise. In dark times, we lose the willingness and even the capacity to accommodate others for the sake of unity. Why? Because we've lost that civic friendship that is the primary rationale for compromise. Friendship is prior to accommodation, not its result. Without conversation, there is no friendship. Without friendship, there is no trust. And without trust, there is little or no chance for compromise. So let's sum up. Dark times do not result from the problems themselves, but from the failure of talk. Meaningful public talk requires and presupposes bonds of affection. In dark times, when the discourse of friendship fades away, opponents become enemies and compromise for the sake of unity becomes weakness. Does any of this sound familiar, people? Of course it does. In your work, you see it every day, don't you? Okay, so what? If this is the challenge of our time, what is the right thing to do? Well, my fellow delegates, you know the answer. It's to do exactly the work that we've come here to do. Meeting the challenge of failing public conversation is the very heart and mind of our work. It's our mission and our method. It's why Braver Angels was born, and it's the reason for our growth and success to date. In this sense, my friends, we are truly blessed because we as civic leaders are suited, we are fitted to the time we live in. No, we have not turned the tide. The polarizers are still winning, but we're gaining on them. Look around you. There are more than 700 of us here from across the country, across the political spectrum, and if I can be blunt for a moment, we aren't just 700 butts in the chairs. We're here to do something. We're suiting up. We're being trained. We're here to connect to one another and to a just cause. If I could put this in one sentence, I would say that we are stepping outside our normal roles to become citizens in the deepest and most patriotic sense of that word. And don't forget that numerous evaluations of our work to date, including by independent researchers publishing in peer-reviewed journals, show that what we do, what you do, gets impressive results. And why is that? Exactly, why is that? I'm glad you asked. There are 7 reasons why, and I'm going to just very quickly touch on each of them. 1, we deploy each of society's 3 main approaches to conflict: dialogue, debate, and communion. The first main approach for us is dialogue, such as in our workshops, where we adapt therapeutic techniques to encourage people to relate to one another personally, to listen to each other, and to hear each other with the goal of healing often painful differences. By contrast, when our methodological approach is debate, the point of entry is declaring one's opinion about a specific issue in order to interact according to formal rules with people who hold competing opinions. Which approach is better? Well, for us, that's the wrong question. Dialogue and debate both stem from the Socratic method of learning. They are 2 branches of the same tree. Some people prefer one branch and some the other, but at Braver Angels, we use both because if done properly, both can advance our mission, and we want everyone to find a way in. Which brings us to the approach of communion, as in music and the arts. Why? Because we know that some forms of engagement, in fact, arguably the deepest and most profound forms, can take us where conversation alone does not, at least typically does not. That's why music from the beginning has been integral to our way of working. It's why at this convention, there's dialogue and there's debate, but also songwriting workshops, a photography project, a theatrical performance, and numerous other forms of artistic expression. because these two are vital ways to find and enjoy our common humanity. Dialogue, debate, communion, all three. And we found that these three stand best when they stand together. You could do a lot more clapping than I could sip my water. All right, I'm going to remember that. Two, I'm going to go, these are going to be short after this. Two, we insist on political equality. Here's how we put it in our organizational commitment. Many of you know this. We call it the Braver Angels rule. Red and blue leaders are equally represented at every level of organizational guidance. You know, we mean that. You'll see it if you look around this room. And if I had to pick one thing that distinguishes Braver Angels from other groups, this would probably be the thing. It's what makes everything else we aspire to do possible. Three, we value both red and blue patriotism. Land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrim's pride. That's Samuel Francis. Oh, yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me. And yet I swear this oath, America will be. That's Langston Hughes. Now, which of these sentiments is more patriotic? Again, for us at Braver Angels, that's the wrong question. Many of us, especially conservatives, look back with patriotic reverence at our lived history and on what our founders bequeathed us. Many of us, especially progressives, look ahead with patriotic insistence that America can finally become what America at its best was always meant to be. I look at these two differing perspectives and I see one thing: love of country. At Braver Angels, we aspire to model a patriotism big and broad enough to welcome all of us in a shared project. Four, we don't exclude people. Here's how we put it in what we call the Braver Angels way. All of us have blind spots, and none of us are not worth talking to. Now, are we really saying that none of us see the full picture? I mean, not even me? Yeah, that's what we're saying. Are we really saying that we welcome people who say terrible things? People who don't care about the facts? Who talk down to other people? Who are so extreme as to be nutty or dangerous or maybe both? Yeah, that's what we're saying. For us, the problem isn't bad people. The problem is bad collective thinking about whether and how we are willing to engage one another. 5, we're a social movement in an organizational container. Yes, Braver Angels is legally incorporated. We have bylaws, we have a board of directors, so we're an organization. But we know that no single organization, no matter how big or effective, can turn the tide. And since that is exactly what we intend to do, we wake up every morning and we don't ask, how can we build our brand? But how can we help give birth to a broad social movement made up of many diverse networks and organizations that together will accomplish far more than Braver Angels alone could ever do? Now, what we call our Braver Network now has 262 and counting member organizations, 162 of which have sent delegates to this convention. My friends, be of good cheer. We're gaining on them. Number 6, we influence both individuals and institutions. What's more important, changing hearts and minds of individuals, or changing the power structure? Again, for us, that's the wrong question. We do both. The foundation and heart of our work is grassroots, citizen to citizen, because we know that in all successful movements for change, the first and most important thing to change is ourselves and each other. That's the basis. But we also know that we will not change America unless and until we change both the outlook and behavior of our leaders and the rules of the game that so often frustrate cooperation and reward conflict entrepreneurs. That's why our theory of change says that large and growing numbers of changed citizens can in turn demand and win changes in institutions, which in turn fosters more citizen change and mobilization. So we transform today's vicious cycle into tomorrow's virtuous cycle. Now, watch what happens with this in our new American Hope campaign, where we take our Braver Angels message and model into the halls of political power across the country. We'll gain on them. Finally, we dig deeper. This one is so important. Civility, skills, bridging. These are good and important concepts. But for me, they don't get us completely to the heart of the matter. We need water from a deeper well. We can learn from Gandhi, for example, that the essence of civility is not just being polite or demonstrating good manners. The essence of civility is the inner desire to do good to your opponents, to wish them well, to care for them. That's the deeper civility that we need. We can learn from James Madison, one of the most revered of our founders. Some have called him the father of our Constitution, that self-government requires a higher degree of virtue in the citizens than any other form of government. This is what Madison said in the Federalist Papers. Skills, yes. Also, a higher degree of virtue. We can learn from our fellow delegate, Jonathan Rausch. I don't know if is John here somewhere? I know he's here somewhere. We can learn from our fellow delegate, Jonathan Rausch, a gay man who I publicly opposed for years on the issue of gay marriage. We can learn from him that bridge building means engaging every day the very Americans who you believe, often with good reason, do not wish you well, and whose goals may directly and even physically threaten you and those you love. That's bridge building in the truest and bravest sense, in the Braver Angels sense. My fellow delegates, what we're doing here is not thin stuff. It's not for the faint of heart. There's a reason, at least one reason, why we changed our name to Braver Angels. We are challenging ourselves and our colleagues to push deeper than the typical, the expected, the safe. I truly believe that so many of us thirst for water from a deeper well. Well, to me, these are the principles, the aspirations that are our secret sauce. And I want to suggest to you that they constitute a realistic basis for believing that we will, in the end, complete our task. That we can help save our country from the dangers now threatening us. And that years from now, we'll look back at our time together at this convention as an important moment for us and for our country. But I want to say a final word. about hope. As you know, the initiative we're launching at this convention is called the American Hope Campaign. A very important idea, hope. The Czech writer and political leader Václav Havel beautifully distinguishes between hope and optimism. For Havel, optimism is believing that what you are doing is likely to turn out well. Hope is believing that what you are doing needs to be done regardless of how it turns out. Havel lived and struggled most of his life in dark times, living under communist rule in Czechoslovakia, frequently arrested by the authorities, prevented from doing his work as a playwright. Havel once wrote a letter to the country's supreme leader explaining why communism was a violation of the human need for truth and why he, the supreme leader, should resign. He typed the letter. He put it in an envelope. He put a stamp on it. He mailed the letter. He did not get a reply to the letter. But amazingly, things turned out well. The Velvet Revolution of 1989 overturned communist rule in Czechoslovakia. From being a hounded, unemployed playwright and the author of a letter that the intended recipient probably never even saw, Havel became the widely acclaimed president of the new Czechoslovak Republic. But Havel did not work in optimism, he worked in hope. And perhaps that was the key to how things turned out. Havel once tried to answer the question, Havel once tried to answer the question, where does hope come from? His answer was elsewhere. Elsewhere. I love that answer. Hope comes from elsewhere. Not from reading the tea leaves, not from calculating the odds, not from trying to predict, not from discerning observable circumstances, from elsewhere. Now, I think he meant perhaps a place of the Spirit, a place where what is possible can be more than what is seen. And as I look out at you, and I consider what we do, and I consider why we are here, I think this is a place of the Spirit. For me, today, hope doesn't come from elsewhere. It comes from here. My friend, serving you as the president of Braver Angels is the honor of my life. I couldn't be prouder to stand with you, to struggle and march with you, to face the times we are in with clear eyes and full hearts and say together, we will do this work.
We will do this work. That's why we're here. We're here because we're concerned about our country. We're concerned about the tribalism that is tearing our families, our communities, and our country apart. We're concerned about the toxicity that is poisoning our national discourse. I spent 20 years serving the country as a diplomat, and I can tell you that this polarization is not only keeping us from solving our most basic problems, it is weakening us in the eyes of the world. It can make people feel hopeless. One thing I've learned in the years I've been with Braver Angels and have been talking to people about this issue is that an awful lot of people in this country feel like this toxicity is something that is happening to them, like the weather. They don't see it as something that they have a part in. They don't see how they contribute to it, and they don't see what they can do about it. But we do. That's part of what brought us here. We see that there are things we can do about it. We see that there are things we have to do, and we are doing them because they need to be done. Someone has to, and we are stepping up. We know our methodology works. So many people have told us that our work has helped their families. Many of you feel that way. Braver Angels has helped us in our families, helped us repair our friendships, helped us find our better angels, and shown us, as Lincoln said, we are not enemies, but friends. Repairing our hearts, our families, and our communities might not feel like enough given the state that our country is in. But it is a start, and it's an important foundation for changing the country. We are all here to make a difference. We are all here to turn the tide. And if the world out there won't fix it, we will. But we need to get more of the country to stand up and help us turn the tide. And one of the most powerful ways to get people to join us is to be invited by someone they know personally. And we are asking if you all will help. After the debate last night, people across the United States are worried about the future. They're looking for a place to go with that worry. So we are asking you, each of you, if you would, to put a post on social media today, inviting people you know to join us to be part of turning the tide. You will receive an email this morning with language and a link. And if all of us post something like this today, when people are this concerned or horrified by the debate, it will make a difference. So look for that email. One thing that's already been noted, but I want to elaborate on a little bit, is that you are not here as an audience to sit back and consume what is presented to you. You have an active role to play in this convention and in this work. You are participants, and more than that, you are here as delegates. Delegates help us determine the future of our organization. For example, last year, our delegates wrote a platform about Braver Angels helping to lead a movement for civic renewal. They debated it, they voted on it, and adopted it. This year, a balanced committee, balanced politically, reviewed the platform and made suggested edits. All the edits offer clarification or further explanation of the concepts that were already there before, particularly explaining the Braver Network and what we mean by civic renewal. Since none of the edits introduce new commitments for the organization, we're going to finalize it differently this year. As delegates, you will all receive an email with the revisions made by the committee. We are asking you to take a look and cast your vote, yay or nay. For those who want to discuss the changes with the committee before voting, there will be a session today at 5 p.m. in DSC 163, that's in your brochure. The discussion is optional, but whether you attend or not, we are asking all delegates to respond to the email with their vote before noon tomorrow. Won't take a ton of time, but it's important. Last year, we finished our Trustworthy Elections project, which you'll hear more about tomorrow, where we did dozens of workshops around the country to identify points of common ground among people with very different political stripes, and distilled those results into a report showing how many things we can agree on if policymakers wanted to solve problems instead of feeding on division. This year, We're going to build on that experience by tackling a new topic. And you will hear more about this process. But as delegates, we are asking you in this convention to help us narrow the options down to one that we will carry forward as part of our American Hope campaign in the year to come. So you will hear more about it, and tomorrow we'll be making that decision. So in addition to those responsibilities that we all have as delegates, this convention will provide us many opportunities to broaden our understanding and strengthen our skills and capacities to make a difference, to have impact in our families, in our communities, and in the country, and prepare ourselves for the tasks ahead. You've all seen the range of breakout sessions on Whova and in the brochure, and there will be breakout sessions in the morning and afternoon, today and tomorrow. An amazing amount of work has gone into preparing these sessions. Most of them have been led by our incredibly dedicated and talented volunteers. So the biggest challenge, yes, thank you. As many of you have already seen, the biggest challenge is deciding which of these amazing opportunities to choose. So, in the afternoon's plenary, you're going to learn about real people involved in Braver Angels and civic renewal work, all showing reds and blues working together to bridge the partisan divide and create hope. Tomorrow morning's plenary, you can learn about all the ways you can take action later this year. And then tomorrow afternoon, as I said, we'll vote on that one issue and learn what we can do in the months ahead to bring our message to the country. In addition to all these plenaries and breakout sessions, there's special activities, evening events, meals, and conversation with friends, old and new. There will be other ways to make your voices heard. When you checked in, you all received a white folder with useful information. In that folder, you will have received one of these postcards about the podcast, A Braver Way with Monica Guzman. For those of you who haven't heard the podcast yet, you're in for a real treat. Search wherever you listen to podcasts and binge the first season. It's extraordinary. For season 2, which launches next week, we're doing something new. And for those of you who attended the watch party, you heard a bit about this last night, but we're inviting you to sign up for the text line for this podcast. The instructions are on this postcard. You will not be flooded with spam. This is a storytelling hotline, and the exchanges are all one-on-one between you and the podcast team. So once a week or so, they'll send out a question to elicit stories. If you have something to add, respond. If you don't, that's great. And you don't have to wait for a question. If you have a story to tell about your experience in this work, in your relationships, you can just share it whenever it strikes you. It's possible the podcast team may contact you to see if you'd be willing to share your story online. And we have with us various videographers and documentarians who may ask you questions about your experiences here in the convention or dealing with these issues in your life. Sharing your stories with them or with the podcast team can help create similar stories of hope out there. After all these incredible experiences, on Saturday night, we will hear an amazing concert. And on Sunday morning, there are final activities, hugs and goodbyes, as we head back into the world, ready to make a difference. I want to say, we all have agency. We can all be part of the solution. We can expand our understanding. We can strengthen our skills. We can build networks to be reckoned with. We can make our voices heard. We can shape our future path. We can bring our message of hope to the country. That's what we're here to do. If they won't fix it, we will. Thank you.
and the speakers are thanked. It's time to welcome to the stage some particular friends of mine from the Braver Angels music team. I'd like to call Ben Karen, Micah Hendler, and John Carroll to the stage to perform a song written by Ben, and it is called Song of Possibility.
While we're getting set up, I just want to preview that we'll all be doing some more singing. So this is, again, as Barbara was saying, not a spectator sport. We're all part of this. So as we sing the song, it'll be clear when it's your turn as well. So thank you. And also just like thank you to Ben for writing this song and for the leadership that you are now taking also in our movement. And we're just super, super grateful. John, Carroll, and I as co-directors of music are just so grateful that you are taking the mantle in such an amazing way. So thank you. Are we ready with our incredible percussion kit? I'm very excited for this. Yep.
Sing a song of possibilities, of things that could become. Far beyond our sensibilities is where we could belong. Follow the thrill of what we will to what we can and what's to come. For there's a world of possibilities for those who heed the song. There's a world that's singing in the distance, heard by those whose hearts have learned to listen. Melody is pure in its persistence. You can hear it when you're dreaming. Hear its rhythm softly beating. All your life it's been repeating. Now it's time to sing. Sing a song of possibilities, of things we could become. Far beyond our sensibilities and where we could belong. Follow the thrill of what we will to what we can and what's to come. There's a world of possibilities for those who heed the song. The song. The song. The song. Take it away, Micah. Hope is not a soft or simple notion. It's a thrill we practice with devotion. It's a thrill you feel beyond emotion. You can hear it when you're dreaming. Feel its rhythm softly beating. All your life it's been repeated. And now it's time to sing. Sing a song of possibilities, of things that could become. Far beyond our sensibilities is where we could belong. Follow the thrill of what we will to what we can and what's to come. There's a world of possibilities for those who heed the song. The song. The song. Trey Carlisle, everybody, let's hear you. Break it down. Yes, keep going, come on. Trey Carlisle, everybody. Hey. So this next part is what we're gonna sing together. And the lyrics are, beat the drum for hope, sing the songs that matter. And it goes like this, here we go. Beat the drum for hope, sing the songs that matter. Sing it together, Micah. Beat the drum for hope, sing the songs that matter. Sing it with her. Beat the drum for hope, sing the songs that matter. Everybody, come on. Beat the drum for hope, sing the songs that matter. Oh, beat the drum for hope, sing the songs that matter. Beat the drum for hope, sing the songs that matter. Just us, here we go. Beat the drum. Beat the drum for hope. Sing the songs that matter. Sing the songs that matter. One more time. Beat the drum for hope. Ooh. Sing the songs that matter. Thank you so much.
Ben
Micah
Karen.
Handler, John Carroll, Trey Carlisle, thank you.
All right, and with that, the singers are thanked.
Okay, y'all, you're about to set forth for your first breakout sessions. It's not immediate. You do have some breathing space. If you need to get a cup of coffee, if you need to go back for something you forgot in your dorm room, do, if you have time, check out the exhibit hall that's in the lower section of the Todd Ware Center where the cafeteria is. Do find volunteers with heart stickers if you're not sure where you're going. And if you signed up for the music songwriting track with these three gentlemen who were just performing, you need to stick around here for a minute to follow them to that secret location where the songwriting track's going to be taking place. Songwriters, stick around. And wait, one more announcement.
I have another announcement. So I got a note that we want to hear from you about how things are going. So there is a convention evaluation survey that will be showing, you can scan a QR code on those screens around the campus. I guess this is the one that's up there now. So please, you can get this one, or it'll be on the screens around campus. Let us know how we can improve.
I'm going to be checking my email for those emails that Barbara talked about so that I can post on social media and so that I can vote on the issue, the platform issue that she mentioned. One more thing to say. Y'all, most of you were here by 8:30 today, but I'd give it a B+ maybe.
Yeah, we're both teachers in background, so we were a little, I think we can do better.
We really need to do better this afternoon because what's happening this afternoon takes the full allotted time and you don't want to miss a single minute of it. So please be here at 1:30. What time is that? I will see you back here. Enjoy your break and your breakouts. Oh, and with that, we are in recess until 1:30.
We lie, but I'ma love you still. You hurt, I heal. We cry, but I'ma love you still. You bail, I dwell, but we try, so I'ma love you still. Oh, I'ma love you still. I'ma love you through it all. I'ma love you still. I'ma love you through it all. I'ma love you still. I'ma love you through it We rush, but I'ma love you still. You hide, I pry, but we trust, so I'ma love you still. You'll call my rage enough, but I'ma love you still.
Conversation. I'm going to invite everyone to take their seats and get situated. We are going to get started. This is a conversation on, is the class divide bigger than the partisan divide? And we have with us a wonderful trio of speakers. I'm going to introduce them here. We're going to be in conversation with each other for about the first hour, and then we'll have about 30 minutes of a Q&A. So with us today, we have Batya Ungar-Sargon. She is the opinion editor at Newsweek, and she's the author of a wonderful new book that I hope you all have read or will read, Second Class: How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. You can find that book in the convention bookstore. Batya, very glad to have you here. Corey Zeck is somebody that Batya interviewed for her book. Corey is a surgery scheduler for Kettering Health Network in Ohio. She's a friend and neighbor of mine in Ohio, and is a part of Braver Angels, We the People's leadership team. And then Matt Kircher is an aircraft mechanic, an Air Force reservist, and a political science student at UNCG, which is UNC Greensboro in North Carolina, and where he is also the Lee Barnes College Debates and Discourse Student Fellow at UNCG, and he's also the Red Co-Chair for the Alliance that is there now. So, thank you for, yes. Okay.
Good morning.
So this is a wisdom-seeking conversation. We're going to try to better understand the class divide, the nature of it, what can be done to bridge the class divide, and get a sense of how big this is and the relationship to the partisan divide. So Batya, starting with you, I'm interested in a little bit of the backstory here to your writing this book. You've had an interesting kind of journey from a journalist at a very left-leaning publication to somebody who's talking to working class people, including a lot of Trump supporters. So I'm just wondering, what are some life experiences that led you to write this book on the working class?
So first of all, thank you everybody so much for having me. In the Jewish tradition, you always say birshus, which means with the permission of before speaking, and you mentioned the people that you feel honored to be speaking in front of, and that's all of you, but especially Corey, who allowed me to tell her story in second class, and I feel so humbled to be sitting next to you on stage, and also David, the book wouldn't exist without you and Amber and the work that you guys have done to give dignity to working class America. And so God bless you and protect you for that. And thank you so much for all of the work that you helped me do, and especially for putting me in touch with Corey and so many other people in the book. People ask me a lot why I wrote Second Class. I was not raised working class. My dad is a country doctor. I was raised middle class. I did not grow up experiencing the contempt of the elites that I write about in the book that is a constant for Americans who do not have a college degree. The book, I'm very proud of the fact that it is not an angry read, because I am very angry. And I know that's not very Braver Angels, but the fact that we have allowed a situation to develop where people who work so much harder than us have to experience our contempt for them on a daily basis, it's enraging. And, there was a comment left recently. I'm not going to be able to answer the question because I don't really know how I got interested in this topic, but I'm going to tell you this anecdote that I read recently in a comment on an interview that I gave, because this is the emotion that made me write the book. And this person wrote about how when she was on a sports team in high school, they went to an away meet for her sports team, and she was on the sports team and her mom was accompanying them, and she was from a working class family, and there was also the daughter of a dentist on the sports team, and her father, the dentist, also accompanied them. And at some point there was some downtime and they were thinking about, well, where should we go eat? And her mom suggested the place that was sort of very special in their family for special occasions, where she would go regularly with her grandparents and her parents. And it was like the place that they went when they had a little extra money to celebrate something. I think it was called Ryan's. Maybe it's like a buffet style from the South. I think it's in the South. I keep kosher. I hadn't heard of it, but so the kind of place that working class people can afford to go for, a nice occasion. And her mom said, well, what about Ryan's? And this dentist went, ugh, I don't want to eat at a trough like that. That experience vis-a-vis what working class people's lives are like is now underwrites every TV show and every movie that is available on a streaming service. And of course, the book is about economics. It's about like the fact that people can't afford homes. But that rage I felt reading that anecdote, that this girl's mom, who works so much harder in such a more difficult job than this dentist, and he's sitting there, ugh, I don't want to. And can you imagine what it was like for this girl now going home when they're thinking next time as a family, where are we going to go for a special occasion? Like, I'm so angry, and I hope you're feeling a little bit of what led me to write the book. The book is not angry. It's stories. It's beautiful stories like Corey's, and Corey's not angry. So I don't know by where I get the right to be this enraged, but I guess that's how I would answer the question.
Batya, I'm wondering, so you go into the class divide in the book. Define for us the class divide as you see it, and also give us a sense of, in your perspective, is the class divide even bigger than the partisan divide? Like, what's the relationship between the two? But yeah, define the class divide for us.
Yeah, I think, again, it's not very brave or angels, but I think polarization is a totally elite phenomenon. So when I was interviewing working class people like Corey from across the political divide, very little distinguished their views. So I'll tell you in brief about two women that I interviewed. So I interviewed Amy, a certified nurse's aide who's married to a woman who lives in Florida. She's the head of her union shop. And I interviewed Linda, a driver for an Amazon truck, and she lives in West Virginia, and she's a big Trump supporter. So in describing these two women to you, you probably think, oh, they would have nothing in common. When the truth is, nothing distinguished their political views from each other. Nothing. So Amy was the gay certified nurse's aide who's married to a woman. By the way, her wife voted for Trump. She loves Trump. Amy was extremely concerned about transitioning children. She felt that parents who took a child to a drag show should be put in prison. This is Amy, right? The Biden voter. She's very upset about, she thinks there's way too much welfare. People should work for a living and they should work hard. She's really proud of her disabled nephew, who she got a job in the kitchen of the nursing home she works in. She does not believe in abortion on demand, and she doesn't understand why we're supporting Ukraine in this war. She just doesn't understand why. That's Amy, okay? Linda is extremely pro-gay. In fact, when Linda, the Trump voter's nephew, came out and Linda's sister kicked him out, Linda took him in. And she said, I will always stand by you. I don't care what people do in the privacy of their own home. Linda was raised in the South. She's extremely proud of the fact that this country is no longer racist. She doesn't support abortion on demand, but she doesn't support banning it. She doesn't understand why we're funding the war in Ukraine, and her number one issue is homelessness, and why can't working class people get a little bit of assistance? Like, why does all the assistance go to the people who don't work? She hates welfare, obviously, and not to the people who work really hard, okay? Nothing distinguished. And that was what I found across the board. I found so much consensus on the issues. The vast majority of the Democrats I interviewed, Corey was an outlier, want much less immigration. Like, a total moratorium on immigration. This was the Democrats, working class Democrats. And the majority of the Republicans I interviewed wanted some sort of government-backed catastrophic health care. And I like to say the first candidate to come out the gate and say we need much more access to health care and much less immigration is going to get an immediate 60% of the vote. So so little distinguishes working class people from each other. even if they're Democrats or Republicans. So why are some Democrats and why are some Republicans? Well, some vote on immigration and some vote on healthcare. Like, that's the whole thing, right? But they are very united, and it would never occur to them to hate someone for picking the other party because it means so little to them, because both parties hate them and don't do anything for them in their view. And meanwhile, you look at the elites, and honestly, like, there's polarization at the level of Trump and this and that. But it's funny because my husband told me not to say this, but last night, there was very little of the sentiment that I think probably, I mean, I've been texting people and that a lot of people felt like nobody stood up here and said, wow, Trump came off pretty presidential, right? No one here felt that, because I think a lot of people here are probably, you know, educated people with college degrees, with credentials. And so you guys, some of you are wearing blue lanyards and some are wearing red lanyards, but all of you feel that, you know, there's something undignified about the way that, you know, Trump presents himself, right? Like, that feeling of like that politics is about aesthetics or about character, that is very uniting to people in the elites. And the other thing that's really uniting to them is, like, they like to really fight about things like symbolic issues in politics and culture wars, and working class people just don't have that luxury.
So it's your sense that, I'm interpreting what you're saying, that among working class Americans, the big divide is the class divide between working class America and the elites, not so much of a partisan divide. One of the, just thinking about your book is a lot about economics and, you know, do working class Americans have a fair shot at achieving the American dream today? I think a core sentiment that you said that people said over and over again is that you could do everything right, still have only a 50-50 shot at making it. Corey, I'm wondering your perspective on this. You are someone who, you work in healthcare administration now. You worked at McDonald's off and on for about 13 years. You went back to school to get to work on a degree in health information management. What is your perspective on that question of, do working class Americans have a fair shot at the American dream?
I've been chewing on this for a while. And even though I've moved forward from where I was, I still don't think that the typical picture of the American dream is really possible. I don't think we have a fair shot at it at all. A lot of that is coming from a perspective of somebody, if you have read the book, you will see my story in the book. When she interviewed me, I was homeless. Me and my family had no place to live. We were living with my family of 5, my sister's family of 4, in her 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. And we did that for almost a year until Christmas last year. We got our own place, and it's very nice, and we're doing well. And where I was last year is nothing compared to where I am now. But even so, I mean, we moved into a trailer and it's very nice. I still would like to own a house one day, but that still seems like such a far-reaching goal for me. Because there's so much that goes into it. You're talking you got to find a lender that's willing to rent to you. You have to find, you have to make sure it's a rate that you can afford, that your mortgage isn't going to fluctuate. Like, there's so much that prevents people like me who only want to establish roots and create their living space in one place rather than having to worry about constantly if they're going to have to move somewhere else. I just don't think it's fair. There's too much red tape, not enough compassion. I think compassion, landlords even anymore can't even afford compassion, really, if you really start to think about it. Because if you look at the rates of rent and how they're increasing and the requirements that go into just finding a place to rent, not even buying, just renting. They're talking, in our area when we were looking, the average price for the amount of space that we needed is around $1,800 a month. And that is not luxury. That is just basic, a basic apartment that is 3 bedrooms, because that's what we needed. We have 2 boys and a girl, so I couldn't have everyone share a room. So that's why I needed 3 rooms. $1,800 a month. And it can go up to as high as $2,000 in areas around me. and they want you to make $6,000 a month to cover the rent. My husband and I don't bring in that much, and we make good money at what we do. We don't work what I would call a Joe job. We don't work in.
Your husband is a factory worker?
He's a quality auditor for a factory in Monroe, Ohio, so he works very close to home. And we make good money doing what we do. But even still, the idea of trying to find a place to rent, we lucked out when we found what we had. I mean, if I'm really honest, we lucked out, and we couldn't have got it without help from family.
So housing is a big issue, an obstacle to achieving the American dream, something that you talk a lot about in the book. Matt, I'm wondering if you could help us explore something here, which is, there's two things that we hear a lot. One is you hear a lot from employers and people who in the skilled trades and so forth. They can't find enough of skilled tradespeople to fill the jobs. And then we also hear a lot what Corey just said and what people told Batya, which is that you can do everything right and that you still only can have a 50-50 shot at achieving the American dream. You're an aircraft mechanic. You work in the skilled trades. You didn't go to college right out of high school. Give us a little bit of a sense of your story here and help us to understand these two things. Employers can't find enough of skilled tradespeople. People are having a hard time achieving the American dream.
Sure. Well, thank you for being here and allowing me to share my story. Yeah, so my experience is very different from Corey's. We're still in the working class together, but I think, Batya, you referred to my sort of part of the working class as striving. I started out enlisting in the Air Force. I didn't have money to go to college and that sort of thing. And I understand that the military is not for everyone. There's also a lot of disqualifiers for obvious reasons. So I'm sort of blessed in that respect. So the military helped me pay for college. I did save up a considerable amount of money during my first year of training because they provide housing and healthcare and all of that jazz. And I lived off of that for the first year and a half while I was going to community college and going to trade school and that sort of thing. But to touch on your questions, there are some issues with people going into the skilled trades, one from perception, and then two, sometimes the pipeline's difficult because I'll give you an anecdotal moment here. So while I was going through trade school, there was like a symposium or what have you for different employers in the area that came by to chat with us, that sort of thing. And each employer said, oh yeah, by the way, when you come in, we want to see 2 to 3 years experience, blah, 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 right? Each one of them said this, and I don't think they realized they were standing in front of a bunch of students who didn't have any experience. So where's that going to come from? And I stood up and I asked that question. And I said, awesome. I said, myself, and I pointed to another Navy veteran who was sitting next to me. I said, we have experience coming in, so we'll get hired, right? But what about the rest of the people in this room, right? And they kind of stammered over themselves for a little bit, and they're like, well, and they couldn't really answer the question. And I think one of the employers had the audacity to say, well, you can volunteer at a museum. Oh, right, volunteer.
You can volunteer where?
At a museum. At like an aircraft museum, and volunteer your time there, and then that'll be good experience for us and we'll hire you, right? So that's ridiculous, right? And these are owners of companies that are saying these kinds of things. So the disconnect is really stark. But also there's this whole perception from the elites issue with perception. And that issue is that as a student, as a young person going through school, primary and secondary, you're told that the way to succeed is to go to college. Go to college, get that 4-year degree, and that's where you'll find success. And blue collars kind of looked down upon, right? And it's never expressed to students in school that, oh yeah, by the way, there's different tiers to this blue collar thing. And they have trade schools, and trades make a lot of money, and they have great health care. Right?
Did you go into the trades mainly as oh, well, I can't afford to go to college, so I guess I'll try the trades? Or was it like I want to be a tradesperson?
Okay, so kind of. Mine my answer to that's nuanced. I wanted to be a commissioned officer, and I wanted to go to flight training, and I wanted to be a pilot. Okay, I'm 34 and I still haven't hit that mark yet. All right, I'm back in college to try and go for that again. But I knew I wanted to work around aircraft. Aviation has been a passion of mine, since as far back as I can remember. So I sort of charted out my pathway through the Air Force and going enlisted first, because I wanted to give myself stability and a career first before pulling out a massive amount of student loan debt, essentially having a mortgage worth of debt and not having a home to show for it, right? And so, but through what I did, I was able to buy a home at 26 years old. And I had great health care through the whole thing.
But it wasn't as if you kind of found this by accident. You didn't feel kind of like this wasn't the narrative, like the premium way to do it. Like the premium way to do it would be you go to a 4-year college and so forth.
Yeah.
And so that's an area where that could be addressed, right? Where look, there are a lot of you can make a lot of good money in some of these skilled trades, but sometimes there's not the awareness of that, and people, and there's just obstacles to getting into the trades, even if you do get the education. Batya, I want to go back to the subtitle of your book. You mentioned that you are angry, and the subtitle of your book, I think, reflects this, right? How the elites betrayed America's working men and women. And Batya, knowing you a little bit, reading the book, I'm like, oh, Batya isn't like, her anger doesn't really come across as strongly in this book. It's really just kind of, a telling of the stories and so forth. But you are angry, and I think you're angry because of the perspective that elites are betraying America's men and women. So give us one or two concrete ways that you see that happening, and also give us a sense of, for the working class people that you interviewed, do they see themselves as victims of elite betrayal?
Great question. So one of them relates to what you were saying. First of all, thank you for your service. Thanks
for paying your taxes, by the way.
It's such a good answer. We used to fund vocational training in high school. So kids, boys who have a harder time sitting, for long periods of time listening to women prattle on, who maybe are not great at algebra and not great at Shakespeare, like now they're told, well, you have to go to college if you want the American dream, and that's not feasible, and so they end up struggling. And it used to be we would fund vocational training in schools and technical colleges and vocational training at secondary schools. And so we as a society were investing in something that we actually need, which is like plumbers and electricians and skilled trades folks of other kinds, and turning our neighbors into people who have the American dream. And Obama totally defunded vocational training in schools. We now give, this is so enraging, we give $200 billion a year to higher education and just $1 measly billion to vocational training, vocational schools. It's just disgusting. I mean, it is an upward transfer of wealth from our neighbors who work harder than us into our pockets. Like, it's just so disgusting. Like, the intentional impoverishment of our neighbors. And so, the three main things, like the way that it sort of happened was, first, they signed NAFTA into law and they shipped 5 million very good working class jobs that created middle class lifestyles for the people who did them overseas to China and Mexico, and we built up their middle class for some reason. So we ship all these great working class jobs overseas. And then for the remaining jobs that stayed here, like service industry jobs, right, and skilled trades, we defunded the skilled trades so that Americans no longer had a pipeline into them. And then, to add insult to injury, they opened the border effectively and imported millions and millions and millions of people from failed socialist states to compete with the jobs that remained here, right, in the service industry. You know, it's so hard for us to remember that in the 70s, an American woman could be a manicurist and buy a home, right? We intentionally took, 6, 7, 10 industries and just pumped them full of people who have no rights here. And so they couldn't ask for minimum wage. They have no benefits. And of course, the people who lead our corporations were like, more slaves, more slaves. And this was like bipartisan, of course, right? Both parties love this. And I mean, that's sort of like so that was the big betrayal. And to add insult to injury, if you objected to this as a working class person, you got called racist. Like, they made you poor, and if you said, I don't want to be poor, I want to support my family, oh, you're a racist, right? If you object to the open, why don't you want immigrants here? You're xenophobic.
So the immigration policies is a big thing. The big discrepancy between vocational funding and higher education is a big thing. These are big ways that elites, in your view, have failed the working class. Now, what about working class? When you talk to working class people, how did they talk about the elites and their where they were in life? Did they see it as like, oh, the elites are doing this to me? How did they talk about that?
I think this is why I'm so angry, is because like a lot of people, and Corey could speak to this better than I can, but a lot of people, they assume the responsibility for the failures on themselves. Like, they just felt like, well, I guess I didn't try hard enough. I guess I wasn't smart enough. I guess I didn't work hard enough. I guess I could have paid more attention in algebra. Maybe I could have worked a little. Like, they don't recognize the system-wide, like, plunder of their pocketbooks by the elites of both sides. They take responsibility for it and say, because they don't have victim mentality.
They don't have a victim mentality. There's a lot of language of personal responsibility, of agency, and so forth.
Do you want to speak?
Yeah, Corey, go ahead.
Ditto. I mean, and that was a lot of what we got when I would talk to people about my story. A lot of responses from people on both sides. Well, what did you do? Why didn't you do X, Y, Z? And I'm like, we did. And keep in mind, my husband and I, when we were homeless, we both worked. We both had jobs. We were both working. We had our kids to support, not to mention we were helping my sister pay her bills because we tripled her bills by moving in. And so that language of personal responsibility is what has always been taught. It's just been taught. That's what we learn. And I've come to find out just through this experience and through getting to interview with Batya that some of it is a personal responsibility, but there's a lot of things that happen that were out of my control as a working class.
And if I could just mention one of those, I don't know not to tell your story for you, but I mean, it's something I think that's very relevant in the book. A lot of people struggle right now with credit card debt. And when people hear that, they immediately think like, oh, well, this person just bought a new dining room set or a car they couldn't afford, right? Like, that's one of those things where people are like, well, this is obviously your fault. You could have not spent that money. The majority of Corey's credit card debt came from emergency room visits. I mean, what kind of a society says you don't get to even be able to find a home to rent because you had to go to the emergency room with your kids? I mean, it's so disgusting. And I think there's just so much of that where they use and even liberals do this. I mean, like, I'll even say, when Corey first said to me, credit card debt was one of the main reasons she couldn't find a home, of course, there was a part of me that was like, oh, I wonder what she bought. Like, I wonder if she thinks that was worth it, right? And then I was like, well, what did you spend the money on? What was the credit card? And she told me it was from medical visits. And of course, I felt like deeply ashamed of myself, but that is part of the thing, is like, we all have that in us. Well, I don't have credit card debt. I manage not to spend beyond my means, right? And the whole system is set up in a way for us to absolve ourselves of the responsibility of the role that we have played in that situation, where we're sitting in our nice homes and our neighbors cannot afford even rent. They cannot find some place to rent.
I do think it is an interesting finding that, the stories of great challenge that working class people experience, and yet the automatic default is to look at ways in which I am personally responsible, ways in which I do have agency. And that's an interesting finding, I think. And I do want to just, you interviewed Skylar, our mutual friend Skylar. He's an electrician. You know, he was homeless as a teenager, and then eventually got into the skilled trades. He and I have been going back and forth about this, and he's been thinking a lot about this. Like, what's the role of agency and personal choice versus, forces that are bigger than ourselves? I want to read something that he said to me recently, and I want to get some reactions to it. He said, "It may not be popular to say, but the working class men and women I know who married young, practice financial prudence and budgeting, adhere to some kind of communal moral code, whether religious or secular, and attempt to plan their lives around navigating challenges and goals, have typically made their way to comfortable existences. Whether they are skilled tradespeople or not," Skylar believes, "there is still enough opportunity in America for a working class person's agency to matter, and to matter more than elite power." Reactions to that idea? Go ahead, Matt.
Okay. I think so. Bach, I only touched on your book, but I think you mentioned 3 distinct sort of classes or segments of the working class, and so I don't remember what you would call Corey's side of it, but I think the jobs that Corey and her husband are doing or were doing are threatened by immigration and that sort of thing, not so much the skilled trades. Because there are sort of barriers to entry on the skilled trades, right? You have to go to trade school and that sort of thing. You got certified, and then to work in transportation, sometimes you have to be a citizen, right? So those things are checked. So also, I think that inflation is a really big part of it. However, I was looking in your book, and you do have this wonderful chart where you chart out GDP and then stagnating wages, right? So I want to look more into that. But before looking at that, I was 100% sure that what was hurting people in the working class the most was inflation. And I consider inflation the hidden tax, right? I mean, each time we can't balance the budget and we have to pay for it, we borrow, right? And so every time we do that, we inflate and then devalue the dollars that you and I have to try and make ends meet. And it makes it more and more difficult. It raises our rent, it raises the cost of food, everything. So, yeah.
So that is a big force that you would point to that potentially matters even more than people's agency is inflation. Any other responses to this idea that, thinking about the role of personal agency versus forces that are bigger than ourselves?
I think personal agency is an important thing to have, looking at the choices that you're making. But I think there's an education piece to this. I was not educated when I married very young. I was 22 when we got married. We had already had our oldest child by then. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. And the education piece that used to be like from my parents' generation, this was very much taught. My parents, I love them. They're great people. They did not teach me these things. They didn't teach me how to make the right choices. They didn't teach me about taxes and what I was going to do until I got to that point. I should have been learning that years before I got to that point. So I think while I kind of agree with, personal agency is important and you should be looking at the choices that you're making, I definitely think that the education piece to this can't be overlooked. You have to teach it young so they get it. And then, because that's what we're trying to teach our kids, to prevent them from making the same mistakes that we've made that landed us in really bad places and caused trauma in their lives that we can't take back.
Right. Yeah. So the experiences that we have in childhood, that matters a lot for the kind of decisions that we make. I want to touch on immigration. Immigration is a big theme in your book. You talked a little bit about it. I was really struck by, you noted that working class Americans you spoke with, quote, have a feeling of kinship with illegal migrants because of their own precariousness. And you said that working class people you talked to, rather than talking about immigration in moral terms, they talked about it in economic terms. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think probably it's safe to say most of the people in this room, it's very hard for us to imagine like having to pick up everything and move to another country and cross a desert in order to be able to support our families. That's just very far from being true of us. That is not very far from being true of many working class people. And so they don't look at illegal immigrants like some sort of alien species coming to the land, the promised land, and like, who could possibly deny these people? Like, all they want is a shot to feed their families, because working class people are like, yeah, I could totally see myself doing that, but why is their plight, more important than mine? I'm struggling too. And I think that there's this you are so removed from that experience. And those people, right, they don't threaten our jobs. They don't speak the language. They don't have our credentials, which we love. They're not a threat to people working in elite jobs or in the knowledge industry. Of course, why wouldn't you want those people to come? In fact, it's like not just that they're not a threat to us, they literally put money back in our pockets, right? Because when you hire somebody like that to be your nanny or your cleaning lady or your landscaper or to work in your restaurant, you don't have to pay them as much as you would have to pay an American. And so it's, again, an upward transfer of wealth from would-be working class workers into our pocketbooks. So for us, it's also an economic thing, but we don't talk about it that way. We talk about it like it's a moral thing. Like, why wouldn't we want to help these people? But for working class people who are in a very similar situation, they have much more empathy for these people because they could totally picture themselves in that scenario. But also they feel like, okay, well, if we're the same, why are they getting chosen? Why does the fact that I'm an American not matter for anything? And people would always say, like, I have nothing against immigrants. But honestly, like, just think for a second. Somebody who has like $53 in their bank account and 4 kids to feed and to get to school and back, what are the chances that that person is wrong about the economic policy that's good for them and bad for them? I mean, where is their cushion for being wrong about that policy? The economists who tell us that immigration raises the GDP, right? Like, they have a huge cushion to be wrong about that. And moreover, GDP, as we all know, is not evenly distributed. It's not like when the GDP goes up by 1%, you take that 1% and each American gets a fair shot at it. It's all gone to the top 20%. So if you look at the spread of the economy in the 1970s, which was the high watermark for working class wages, the biggest share of the GDP was in the middle class. If you look at today, the biggest share of the GDP, right? Over 50% of our GDP, you probably all think it's in the billionaires, especially if you're wearing blue lanyards. It's actually not. The share of the GDP that's controlled by billionaires has not significantly changed since the 70s. So where did all that middle class wages go? It went to us. It went to the top 20%. It went to people with multiple degrees and multiple credentials in the knowledge industry. And how did we do that? How do we plunder the working class? By opening the border, by offshoring manufacturing through NAFTA, and by abolishing trade schools.
And so I just found it interesting that in our political discourse sometimes, when we talk about immigration, it's the things that we hear are those immigrants they're criminals, they're nasty, they're blah, 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 blah. What you were hearing was not that. You were hearing, I'd do the same thing if I were in their shoes. I totally understand why they're doing what they're doing. And I really think it's a problem that I think you talked to a cleaning guy who runs a cleaning business in LA. And he was just finding it really hard to compete against the lower prices that that immigrants have for their businesses. And Corey, I saw you nodding your head while she was talking. Tell us how you see this.
I can see this because I can relate to it, because I've had to essentially do the exact same thing. I've had to completely lose everything, leave everything that I had behind and move to someplace new and start from the ground up. I was very blessed in that I had a lot of help from my family, but my husband and I went into our new place with nothing. We literally had nothing. We were expecting to fund this completely on our own with just our jobs, buying one piece at a time as we could afford it. And then we ended up getting very blessed in that my mother's family stepped in and helped us purchase everything that we needed. So that's why I can relate to that. That's why working class people, especially if you've been homeless and have had to lose everything, can relate to that, because we've had to do the exact same thing. We may not have had to travel as far or cross a border, but we've lost everything and had to move it and start over. So
Another aspect of this that you hear sometimes is that the sense that immigrants are taking the jobs that Americans don't want to do. Matt, your reaction to that idea?
I don't see that in the trades. I don't. But I also have not. I've not worked the jobs that Corey has worked and that sort of thing. So I can't speak completely to that. But I haven't seen that in my line of work and in the trades. We do have in the aircraft maintenance industry. There are other sort of unskilled areas of labor. Large companies will hire teams of people to go inside fuel tanks or deal with sheet metal and panels and stuff like that. They get paid less. And I do notice that there are, people who have recently immigrated that take those positions. But in the skilled trades, not so much. And I don't really see that. So.
Batya, I want to ask you a very Braver Angels question. It's kind of one of the highest of the Braver Angels questions, one of the advanced Braver Angels questions, which is a question that is asked in our Red Blue workshop, where people get a chance to say, why they, the values and policies, why they think that their side's values and policies are good for the country. But then, what concerns or reservations do you have about your own side? And I'm wondering, for the argument that you're making in the book, the perspective, which I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is something like that working class people can do almost everything right and still only have a 50-50 shot at achieving the American dream. And this is in large part because elites have made intentional decisions to relegate working class people to second-class citizens. Is that a fair summation?
I don't know why I wrote a whole book. You could have just, that's a tweet. That's a great tweet.
So that's your perspective. I'm wondering, are there any concerns or reservations you have, any doubts or questions you have about your perspective and the argument you're putting forward?
My views were culled from working people who I feel very humbled that they trusted me to tell their stories, and my views have been very much shaped by those encounters. So and my view is we need to elevate these voices because these are most Americans. And even if morally or spiritually, you're not revolted by the situation, if you care about a stable democracy, you can't have a stable democracy without a strong middle class. And we have a disappearing middle class. And if you have most of the country living lives of precarity, your democracy is over. So you should care about this if you just living in safety and stability and security, right? But so to me, it's just elevating the voices of most Americans who we've sort of deplatformed from the public square. My husband's a libertarian, so he thinks all this is bunk. And so
what does your husband say?
He thinks, just free markets, blah, blah, all this stuff. And so, he's constantly every meal we're arguing about economics, and he's telling me why, everything I'm advocating would make working class people poorer and worse off.
So does he ever say something and you're like, you know what? You might have a point there.
Yeah, I'll tell you the last thing that really was an oh God moment. About a month before the book was about to come out, he said to me, "You realize that only 2% of our only 2% of our imports come from China." And it was one of those oh God moments. Is my whole book wrong? Because how important could, offshoring manufacturing be if it just accounts for 2% of imports? But anyway, I still think I'm right about it. But we're constantly in this sort of war, and I think it keeps me honest. And I think that at the end of the day, I'm willing to be wrong about any of the individual economic policies that I think would help working class people. The point I'm trying to make with the book is that they deserve to be heard, and they deserve to have the things they want at least tried once, because that's how a democracy is supposed to work.
Shameless plug for the We the People's Project, because that's our whole goal. So get
well,
with it.
talk more about that. I want to ask you about that, Corey, because I want to get to kind of, okay, so what do we do, right? What can be done to bridge the class divide? Corey, you're someone who cares a lot about politics, and you have a lot of ideas about policies. Imagine for us that right now, there's not a lot of great ways for working class people to participate meaningfully in politics and to impact the political process. But let's imagine that there was. What would that process be like? What would that look like for working class people to have a strong voice and a strong role in making policy?
Getting involved in your community. That's where it starts locally. Get involved in your community. Go to city council meetings. If they have a town hall, be there. Ask the questions that nobody is willing to ask, because don't be afraid. Because I think part of the reason people are afraid to speak is because they haven't been in environments like this where they've been able to speak without fear of judgment. And that fear of judgment can paralyze people. So I think if you can just start locally, get it by getting involved in your city council, going to town halls, that's where it starts. And then if you can work your way through that and maybe get involved on a higher level by talking to candidates, reach out to your candidates, reach out to state candidates, reach out to your local candidates, tell them, I want to do a Braver Angels event, and see what response you get, because that's what I'm doing in Middletown. I got inspired to reach out to our mayor and the city council to see if they'll let me do a We the People's event in Middletown, where I live. That's what kind of things we have to do. We have to be bold, and you have to do bold things, because if you don't and you just sit back on the sidelines and expect someone else to do it, no one's going to do it. That's why we're here. That's why we do what we do. That's why We the People's Project, all of you that are here should be involved with the We the People's Project. We have a We the People's Council. Join it. Get involved. That is your way you can be involved without, that's a place to start too. We have a council, a whole council that meets, and it's just so people like you guys who aren't a part of the leadership team can come to the leadership team and say, here's my idea for an event. What can we do? I want to use the format. How do we do it? How can we tweak it? Do things like that. Be bold, be unapologetic, and don't be afraid.
Matt, I'm wondering, Matt, if you think that politics, maybe particularly grassroots work in politics, can be a way of bridging the class divide, and so that you're working together on a policy idea, and you get working class people rubbing shoulders with non-working class people. Is this a viable way to bridge the class divide?
I 100% agree with Corey. Local politics and state politics are a fantastic way to get involved, and I think that getting involved with those places in that elite class, that will start to bridge that understanding gap, right? I mean, because clearly they don't understand what's going on down at our level. But hold on, I wanted to comment on your husband's libertarian perspective for a second. I also kind of consider myself a little bit of a libertarian. I just wanted to say that I was talking about the pipeline issue with getting into the skilled trades. Well, the free market has responded to that a little bit. Okay, and in the aviation industry, they have recognized that pilots need training, and so airlines are sponsoring their own schools and that sort of thing, and same with aircraft maintenance. And there's a really big, I'm not going to name drop the company, there's a really big, wonderful aviation company in Greensboro. I worked for them for several years, and they started a whole partnership and program with the community college and dumped millions of dollars into the community college. So the free market did respond a little bit. So you can tell your husband that.
I'm a big fan of the free market. The free market got 80% of Americans up to $16 an hour or higher. So while Congress was failing to pass a minimum wage bill, which actually was not very popular with the working class people I was interviewing, the free market through Amazon and Starbucks and places like that just pay a starting wage of $17 an hour. Now over 80% of Americans make $16, $17 an hour or more. It's probably much higher actually at this point. It's probably 18 or 19 after the post-pandemic labor crunch. I'm a big fan of the free market. I just think that when it comes, within the country, we should have a lot of free market policies because they really do work. I think when it comes to, the supply of labor from other countries and offshoring to other countries, when it comes to dealing with other countries, we should have the Hamiltonian view, which is we put our people first.
Awesome.
I want to share something of my own response to reading your book, Batya. And as someone who, before I helped to start Braver Angels, I was working with my wife, Amber, on a project where, and this is how I met Corey. We were, Amber and I, we were interviewing a lot of working class young people, and I myself come from a working class family as well, about stories of forming families. And so anyway, Corey, you and I and so forth, I got really interested in issues of working class through all that. And one insight that I got from reading your book, Batya, was this. The popular narrative about working class in general, and especially the white working class, is that they're angry and resentful. And they hate immigrants. And maybe even, there's a lot of hatred towards billionaires and so forth. Actually, what you see, right, is actually we can identify with immigrants, right? We think there's some policies that need to be addressed here, but we don't hate immigrants. And they also say, I don't hate billionaires. They're like, man, like, I wish I could be one of them. Wow, they figured something out. I wish I could do that. And so, and also and you touch on this in your book, Batya, for me, when I think about like working class people in America today, here's the image that comes to my mind. I was at La Rosa's Pizza in Ohio, where I live, and I'm sitting down waiting for the pizza. I look over into the kitchen, and there, making a pizza, are two men shoulder to shoulder, like right next to each other. One is a Latino man. One is a white man. And they are like right next to each other making this pizza. And I'm like, that's the working class. There is a lot that people are accustomed in their families and in work and so forth. They're accustomed to working with each other across lines of race and ethnicity and in their families. And there's a deep, deep value I've found on tolerance. Tolerance is a deep value. Okay, take all of that, which I think, if that's true, that's a little bit surprising. It goes against the popular narrative. Because there's a narrative here that we have where it pits the elites against the working class, and then the working class American citizens versus working class illegal immigrants. But it seems like that there is you use the word kinship, a sense of kinship that's already there among the working class, that it doesn't have to be this politics that we have right now. When the political discourse, it becomes very angry and resentment and so forth. I hear something different. Yes, people want, policies to be addressed, but I hear I don't know, like seeds of solidarity there. So they're surprising. Am I off my rocker here, or is there something here? What is your reaction to my own reaction to your book here, Batya?
No, I think
Any of
that's
you?
spot on. Yeah, but yeah, I'd be very curious to hear what you guys think.
I want to say something about racism and sexism and all of these divisive topics that I believe are being pushed down onto the population. Being in the Air Force for 16 years, your military is not racist. We are not sexist, okay? We have pioneered integration and bringing women into the military and that sort of thing. So your military is doing great, all right? And I don't see it in my industry of aircraft maintenance on the commercial side either, right? I work with everyone. And we all get the job done at the end of the day. We have a great time doing it. There is kinship and camaraderie. So I don't like the narrative that America is racist. I think that's a terrible thing. And I think we have come a long way, and we should recognize those things. Sure, there are struggles and there are things that we need to overcome, continually, but to a large degree, we're not racist. And I've also traveled with the Air Force. I've gone to other countries, and there's other countries that are significantly more racist than us. And I would say that we're pretty much not at this point when you compare ourselves on the global stage. So that's my opinion on
Corey, I'm wondering from you're a more liberal, progressive person. You care about issues of, racism and so forth. And what's your response to this?
I mean, overall, I think I can agree with was it Matt? There we go. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Overall, I think I can agree with Matt. I think that sense of camaraderie is there. When I was working for McDonald's, that's where my lessons of tolerance came from. I worked with a lot, particularly Hispanic people, but I worked with everyone. And part of that is a personality thing for me. I like you until you give me a reason not to. But there is that air of tolerance there that comes from early on, because you learn that everybody's just trying to work. They're just trying to live, and they're doing what they need to survive. And people will bond over that. And I think these, to speak to the issues that Matt was speaking of, they do happen. But I will say, I think they're being highlighted in ways that aren't really helping them to be solved. A lot of it is coming from things, when you start talking about things like microaggressions and things like that, you start veering off into very sketchy territory. And I think that some of these issues are coming from extremists on either side of them, which is causing them to be brought to light in ways that are not really going to help them be solved. They're just going to make things worse. I'm not trying, and by no means am I shaming anybody who's went through that or anything. I just want to make that clear. I'm just saying that they're not being solved properly, which is why they continue to be brought up. But overall, I don't see America as a racist country. I do think there is a lot of work to be done still in areas, things like healthcare and, addressing the disparities and things like that. But I think that everyone, especially working class people, they know that they're just trying to do what they need to survive, and that bonds us.
Also, I'm not sure that most of the working class really understands what a microaggression is or really cares. Okay, I don't think
Agreed.
we give a flying F about it. All right, but we tend to get along and do the job at the end of the day. I think that's what's important. We're all just trying to make it.
I'm trying to find a way to say this, to articulate this thought that doesn't sound conspiratorial, but it's not an accident that the narrative that the working class is intolerant and racist arose just as America was overcoming its actually terrible racism of the past, or at the same time as liberal elites with many credentials were becoming quite wealthy. Like, that's not an accident. I don't think that there was some decision high up, like, oh, let's start talking about race and gender, and that will really distract everybody, and they won't see that we're lining our pockets with the proceeds of the working class. But that is effectively what happened, is that, at the exact moment that they had created an economy that was an upward funnel of wealth into their pockets, they suddenly started talking obsessively about race and gender and identity and stopped talking about class. And I think the other place you see this is with the discourse around toxic masculinity. Like, I'm not saying that no men are, toxic or what have you, but the mainstreaming of this discourse, that there's something contemptible and criminal about men and machismo and brawn and physicality and mating rituals that have sustained humanity since its inception. That discourse developed at exactly the time that men stopped being able to support a family on a single income. And I don't think that that is an accident. I think it is an alibi.
All right. Well, let's open it up for discussion, Q&A. We have about 30 minutes for this, so I am going to look here. I want to start here in the front. Hank, let's see, we're going to start with Hank, and then I'm going to go to the woman over here. But we need our mics. Who are our mic runners? Great. We need, let's see, do you need 2 of our mics? Let's give you 2 of our mics. Oh, never mind. We got mics out there. Hank Linderman here, the crazy white hair in the front. I know Hank, so I can say that.
And your name is? Hi, David. Hi, Batya. By the way, I'm here because of your book. I wasn't going to come. I came last year, but I'm a Democrat running for Congress in a deep red district. And one of the things we're talking about is how do we make these changes? Now, there was a conference a few years ago in Kentucky that I was part of, Bluegrass Roots Conference, and Tom Frank came. And at that conference, he discussed the only thing that successfully can counter a, what do we call it, a kleptocracy. A kleptocracy is a broad-based populist coalition. And he used the, right, so he used the example of in the late 1890s, the populists, in the 1930s, the labor, and in the 60s, the civil rights group. And we've had some broad-based groups that tried to move forward, like Black Lives Matter, in a way, the Tea Party, and also, anyway, we've had various groups, but they've fizzled. It hasn't really happened. So politics is leverage. So it seems to me the only group that can move this forward is labor. Labor is 60% of the country, roughly, and only 2% of our government was working a working class job when they got elected. So that seems to me, that's the soft spot. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that. But for example, I've been proposing to Democrats that they combine their concern for social justice, that's the nice word for identity politics, with concern for working people. In other words, the best way you can advocate for people of color is to advocate for working people. The best way you can advocate for LGBTQ is working people. And that's already starting to happen. I'm starting to see that happen in various groups. Do you have any other ideas? How else do we make this happen? How do we make this transition? And I'm so sorry, there's one more thing I have to say.
Make it quick, Hank.
You identified yourself as an elite, so I was going to ask you if you were an elite. I'm elite adjacent, so therefore I'm superior to you, at least in the eyes of the... Can you talk about what makes elite society that way? Because they are something strange about elite society.
Okay, well, let's, Lou, you've already asked a very good question there. We're going to hear the rest of the time if we address all of that.
So the honest answer to your first question is one that I don't think anybody in this room is going to want to hear. But there is a broad, populist, multiracial, multi-ethnic, working class coalition. It's here and it's called the MAGA movement. And these people really love Trump, whether they're Hispanic or white or black. I mean, the Uber driver who picked me up yesterday, African-American guy from Kenosha, told me him and all of his friends are voting for the first time for Republican because they love Trump. And that movement is here. And Thomas Frank is not going to be able to see that because I don't know if it's because he's a Republican or because of his character or what have you, but the working class broadly, obviously not everybody, you know, I'm sure you, you know, like Trump, but
We'll get Corey's perspective on this after this.
But there has been, you know, over the last, you know, in 2015, it was not multiracial, it was pretty white. In 2024, Trump is polling with 40% of black men, 56% of Hispanics. The majority of Hispanics are working class, obviously the white working class. And it's not over the Thomas Frank version of, because he convinced them with culture wars, because on culture war issues, Trump is a moderate / liberal. So he is that, that's happening right now, whether we can see it or
Batya,
not.
your answer is MAGA movement. That is the multiracial, multi-class movement.
It is a populist.
It is a populist.
Yeah.
Corey, is MAGA movement the answer here?
Okay. Coming from my comment on the debate last night, which is I was considering flipping my vote from Biden to Trump. That's an odd question to have to answer. The best answer that I can come up with is working people need to get into office somehow. However you try to do that. However you choose to engage in politics, because if that is the answer, then working people need to take the shot and run for office. Because that is the only way that our perspectives and our ideals will get back into politics. And you can't let politics ruin your ideals. That's the other answer that I have.
Well, you and Hank should talk, because I know Hank cares a lot about that as well.
Yeah.
Let's go to the woman here on the second row.
Hi, thank you so much. First of all, my name is Caroline Coster. I'm Brooklyn as well in the house here, 30 years. I'm here with I'm blue, but I'm here with my husband, James, who's red. So I feel like I have found my people in this group. Thank you. Because I'm a senior lawyer on Wall Street, but I have a brother back in Kentucky where I grew up who is a semi-truck driver. And there's probably nobody on earth that I love as much as him, and that makes me laugh the way he does, and that you'd probably all love him as well. And when he comes to Brooklyn, all my friends love him. And so I just, if there is a way, and I hope it's not the MAGA movement, but if there is a way, whether it's national service, is there a way that we can connect our groups and the young people? We go to our family reunion in Appalachia, and those kids, they find connection. And I hope it's not MAGA. I question, though, the intentionality. It may be true. I don't really believe that most people I know are intentionally devaluing the middle class. They may be doing it accidentally, but it is true. During the pandemic—
You're talking about the elites here?
Yeah, I will say, though, during the pandemic, when everybody I know in Brooklyn Heights was literally washing their groceries, my brother was driving a truck for 90 hours a week, hauling hand sanitizer, bourbon, and spaghetti sauce, right, across the nation. But when he got COVID a year later, his paycheck was $261 a week. And when the governor of Kentucky came to New York a few months ago, I said, "Governor, that cannot be allowed to happen. I'm with you, my friend, but we can't have that." So please, I would be on board if anyone has any ideas for getting, especially when they're young. I don't know, I'm sorry, that's more of a
Terrific. No,
statement
thank
than a
you.
question.
Wonderful contribution.
Maybe they have ideas.
Wonderful
Thank you.
contribution to the conversation. Thank you. I want to go to the front here on this side here. Peter with the yellow lanyard.
Thank you, David. I'm Peter Scarry from Boston. I want to start off by saying I'm extremely sympathetic and in agreement with much of which I've heard of this morning. And I'm eager to read your book, Batya. But I have a question that's going to go in a different direction, I think. I think you've been a little unfair to the upper middle class, okay? I teach at Boston College, so I see I'm on the production line, okay? I see the upper middle class in formation. And it seems to me that one thing I haven't heard much about across the board for that matter, is family formation. If there's one discipline, if you'll allow me that word, that the upper middle class takes upon itself, is to delay family formation. They don't delay sex, but they delay family formation. That's critical to the strategy of being in, getting into, and sustaining yourself in the middle class, upper middle class. It's not my impression that working class Americans pursue the same strategy. And I'd like to hear about that. And I think my own prejudice hypothesis would be that that's a big part of the problem that faces struggling, especially white working class people.
Okay, very good. So Peter, you say, Batya, I think you've been a little bit too hard on the upper middle class. And what about family formation? Who wants to take that?
I'll take this one because as someone who formed my family very early on, that was not intentional. I love all of my children. I'm happy. I spent my 20s having my kids. So I had my family very early, and I can relate to what you're saying there because I did not intend to start a family at 21 years old. I was young and stupid, didn't know what I was doing. And I mean, no disrespect to my children, but part of the reason we struggled the way we did was because we had kids so early. we weren't able to develop that plan. We got pregnant unexpectedly when I was 21, I was 20. And then when I had my oldest son, I was 21. You're in the prime of your life at that point. Nobody's thinking about those things. And I think where I think he has some validity to that is we are taught, we have the sex education, you're taught abstinence, we're taught all of that stuff, but that was not what I was thinking about at 21. So the fact that I had my kids early did play a part in the fact that we may not have had the upward movement that we really wanted. I won't say it's all of it, but that definitely played a part in it for sure.
Okay,
Can
more.
I add to that?
Sure, go ahead, Matt. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, so not married, 34 years old, no kids, still looking, by the way. But
he's available.
I'm available. I would say, so right now I'm sort of making a career change. I had a federal position in my career field in DC for about 4 years, working on aircraft. And I resigned and I went back to college. If I had kids right now, probably wouldn't happen, right? So to your point, I agree with you. Also, however, I think that the narrative surrounding pregnancy and having children is a little too far skewed right now, at least from the elite side in our education system, to hold off till maybe it's a little too late, right? Okay, because I'm 34, right? So if I want to meet someone my age or in my age bracket and then think about having kids, that's going to be difficult. Okay, so there has to be some nuance to this conversation, but I understand what you're pointing towards, and I agree with you in that regard.
All right, let's open it up here. Let's go to this side here. You in the front, Mr. Grant, I think it is.
Thank you. Likewise, thank you for everything that you've said. I really enjoyed your book. By the way, Matt Grant from Newport, Rhode Island. I am a blue and a self-identifying elite. So my question is, I know we've talked about, elevating the perspectives, talking about the book, joining the We the People's movement and in Bravery Angels, but how do I, and maybe others in the room, not be complicit in this problem?
How do elites not be complicit in the class divide?
I think it might be beyond their choice at this point because everything's already set. So unless they're willing to take massive pay cuts on their own and willing to watch that wealth be redistributed, I don't think people that we be considered elite really have much of a choice in being complicit. It's just kind of ingrained in it already. Unless the real people who have the ability to change this is CEOs, the people at the tops of the companies. If they're willing to start and they can, work it down through the levels, I think that's really the only way that I can think of that if you don't want to be complicit in it, that you have that choice.
So your comments earlier about community and getting involved with your local politics and that sort of thing, that's the right track. And I think that, okay, so there's a book, Bowling Alone, right? And community organizations had a dramatic hit in recent decades. And so as a result, we don't have people who might be the owners of companies, but then yet also working, in the service industry and things like that, who are in a bowling league together or just involved in the community in some kind of a way. I mean, what we're doing here at Braver Angels is an example of doing that. I mean, we're a civic organization, right? So I think that those are great avenues to solve this problem. Build community.
Wish I would have thought of that.
Let's go over here to in the yellow lanyard, right there. Yeah.
Joel Hodroff, Twin Cities, Minnesota. I think we talk a lot about problems and we're a little short on solutions, and I just want to make a point about where I think the solution lies. We're very confused about money and wealth. Yes, a single head of household working 40 hours a week 70 years ago could buy a house, a car, put food on the table, and get a college education for the kids. So everything that produces wealth has only gotten a million times greater. Technology's only advanced, infrastructure's only advanced, human skill, knowledge, and creativity's only advanced. Our ability to use free and abundant renewable resources has only advanced. So it's a money problem. It's bad economics, and blaming any individuals anywhere in the world, anywhere on the political spectrum, any class is missing the point. We're drowning in wealth. College desks are empty more than they're full. Grocery store aisles full of groceries are empty of customers more than they're full. Businesses want more customers. People need the stuff. The only thing missing is money, and we invented money to match buyers and sellers. And money innovation is part and parcel of all economic history, all economic paradigm shifts, and it's always based on advances in technology. So I'll wrap it up with this because it's a much bigger discussion, but I sent each of you a note and a video link. We went from barter to gold coins based on smelting.
And Joel, take
to
about
paper
15 more
currency
seconds.
Based on printing, to credit cards and e-commerce based on computers and the internet. And it's all still win-lose competition over money.
Thank you, Joel.
Let's
Thank you
move
for
it
that
on.
contribution to the conversation. I see Taylor right behind you there toward the back.
Hi, I didn't know I was get selected actually. My question is for the panel. Do you think, because I think it was mentioned with generations, do you think education about not managing money, managing in a household has contributed to the downfall of the middle class?
Yes.
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 Great question.
Simple yes.
I had wonderful parents, and so I learned these lessons from my parents, and they're phenomenal. So, I owe a lot of debt to them. But I think that we need to do a better job of teaching basic finance in elementary, middle, and high school. And, why not start with elementary school students, right? So I think that that's a big way which we can improve.
Absolutely. I echo that because I have a high schooler. And when my parents were in high school, accounting and bookkeeping were required classes for them. I don't know why that changed. Home economics is another one that should be required, and I don't know why it's not. I don't know why that changed. But we're trying to undo what our parents did, and not, I don't know why they decide. It could be that, my parents are divorced and it was my dad and he didn't have the kind of time to sit down and teach me the lessons I really needed to learn for when I got out on my own, which led to very bad choices, and the rest is history. So I definitely think education young is the answer for sure.
So everybody said yes to that very vocally. Yes. Okay, let's go to this side, and in the back there, red lanyard, Dan Darling.
I'm Dan Darling. We live in Fort Worth. We lived in Nashville for a while. I want to follow up on the question about family formation, but I haven't heard you talk much about it. But if you look at the work of folks like Brad Wilcox or Melissa Kearney, who've done incredible work on this, the presence of a mother or father in the home dramatically increases the chance of success for children. And a lot of the drop-off in marriage and family formation happens among the working class, non-college educated folks. And if you look at new survey out on the decline of church attendance, there's a book called The Great Dechurching. All the drop-off is happening among working class, non-college educated. So I haven't heard you talk much about the impact of the breakdown of the family in the working class and the lack of church attendance and what impact that's having on both the conditions for working class, but also the class divide.
Yeah, Batya, take that on. What did you hear in your working class interviews?
Well, I was going to punt this to Corey and ask her if she could talk about that, but also how you did this Herculean thing, which is you kept your family together at a time, and I'm sure your marriage must have been strained by the economic difficulties. Can you talk to us about, if you're comfortable, how did you pull that off? Like keeping your marriage together, keeping your family together while facing just like absolutely devastating, destabilizing circumstances?
Well, first of all, thank you for that question. It took a lot of work, and a lot of it came from the fact that my husband and I both came from families with divorced parents. We were both raised in single family homes, and we did not want that for our children. And because of, we made a commitment far before we got married that divorce for us was not an option. And so when we were going through all of this, and this, by the way, us being homeless, this was not the first time we had went through that. I've been homeless 3 times in the last 7 years. And so working through that and committing to loving each other through it was the biggest thing, and loving our children through it. And explaining to them that, you know, this is not going to be our forever. That commitment level takes a lot of work. That kind of a commitment, and our marriage was very strained. I'm going to be very blunt about it. We were very strained because we were dealing with his family, my family, their opinions about our situation, and having to funnel those through and make sure that our kids didn't hear them, and taking a lot of things on internally that we didn't, to try and protect our children from that. And we succeeded moderately. But it was just commitment and love. That was it. We committed that we were going to work through it together, and we weren't going to let this, which could have brought us down, and we could have let it, but we didn't let it. And that's how we got through that, for sure.
Let's go to the front here, the woman with the yellow lanyard in the front.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska. I just want to ask if anybody else has seen this trend. In my neighborhood alone, we have 4, and me included, 4 adult children that now live with their parents. I was married, divorced, I'd owned my own house, all of that stuff. But what it came down to was I was living alone. And so moving back into my childhood home with my mom, who is getting older, just seemed to make sense. So I want to know if there is a trend of that anywhere else, because it's bringing the family back together. It's, I do pay her rent because I am an adult. But yeah, what is your opinion on that? Has anybody else seen that trend anywhere? Nebraska's a very low cost of living state, luckily. But we still struggle with, I make $16 an hour. I work in a grocery store. And my mom is retired. So that would be my question to you. Have you seen or heard anything about that?
A lot of people can't afford housing. You're in really good company, and the reasons for that are, I'm gonna get accused of beating up the upper middle class, but that is one of the major reasons. 78% of the land that's zoned for housing is zoned for what's called single family detached. Which means you have a plot of land and you can't build a duplex or a triple decker or put a bunch of trailers on it, nice starter homes for people who are at the beginning, because of NIMBY zoning laws, where, a couple who are like, he's a doctor and she's a lawyer, they go to every community board meeting to make sure that the zoning laws stay, so that every parcel of land can only have a home like theirs, which is a single family detached home, to keep their housing prices up. And that is the reason that there's so much homelessness, because if there's simply no housing, if you lose your housing, it becomes almost impossible to get better housing. There's a lot less in West Virginia, just because you could be pretty poor in West Virginia and still kind of own a home. But in places like California, New York, especially on the coast, Seattle, but also Ohio, when you fall off, there's almost no way to get back on that train. And it's just terrible. It's terrible. And just again, to come back to the immigration thing, like, we let in 10, 15 million immigrants. Each of those people has to live somewhere. So we radically increased the demand when we have a dwindling supply and a dwindling stock. And it is simply not xenophobic to notice that. And yet we've put a taboo on talking about it so that people can protect the equity of their own homes. So good luck, and God bless you, and you're not alone. There's so many. I don't understand how any young person today who's not, part of the elites, can hope to buy a home.
Okay, to close us out, one more here. Let's go to Molly. And this will be the last one, and then we'll have a last word from our speakers.
Hi, I'm Molly. I live in Boston. I'm from Missouri, and I have a solutions-based question for y'all. And as I was listening to everybody talk, I was writing down 4 different kind of goals I heard from people that I was drawing out, and broke them into 12 different policies. And when I was doing that, I realized, all of those require government funding, and we do have ways of, creating more government funding, like people actually paying their taxes that they're not paying right now, for example, which is a huge problem with the elites, for example. One of the questions that it came down to for me in this list is some of what I hear a lot about people struggling in the working class is a distrust of government and a desire to actually have less government. And one of the things that I struggle with a lot is, how do you show people that, if you do want to teach personal finance nationally, that's a national curriculum change, that's at the government level. If you do want to have ER bills covered by the government, that's government funding and that's a policy. If you want to lower taxes for lower income people and raise them for higher income people, that's a government policy.
So how do you see, go ahead.
Yeah, so how do you suggest trying to solve a problem using more government policies that will require funding with folks who may have a deep distrust and a very understandable distrust of government?
Batya, go ahead and take this in 30 seconds, and then we're going to go to the last word from you all. So figure it out in 30 seconds.
When I started writing this book, I read all the other ethnographies of the working class that had been written recently, and they were all written by left-wing academics. And so they all read the same way. They would interview people, and person after person would say to them, we hate welfare, we don't want handouts, we hate welfare, we don't want handouts, we just want opportunities. And the books would inevitably conclude with, you see, what the working class really needs is more welfare, because they couldn't think their way out of that mentality that there's only 2 options. There's trickle down, and then there's raise taxes and redistribute. Neither of those is a working class agenda. And I think what we're seeing with the abortion question now is, if you put a question to voters on a ballot, they will surprise you how they'll vote. They will get out of the mentality of this high level, oh, this is more government, therefore I'm against it. They'll think about what's in my interest, and you'll have red states vote to protect abortion rights and things like that. So I think people are really engaged in the issues when they're given a chance to be.
Okay. Well, thank you to our speakers and to everyone here for a wonderful, what I think was a wisdom-seeking conversation. I want to end us with just 30 seconds from each of you, starting with you, Matt. What is one concrete and practical thing that those of us sitting here today could do to bridge the class divide? One concrete, practical thing. 30 seconds.
Okay, it's not exactly 1, it's 2. Community building, right? So if you're the owner of a company, start some type of civic organization, and then get people in your community involved. And then everyone here can start changing the perception and the narrative for what a blue-collar worker is, right? I think that a blue-collar worker has essentially been demonized in our education system. And so people are turned away from going for high-skilled trades, things like that.
Corey.
I'll kind of echo that, in that getting involved is crucial, however you choose to do that. The other thing that I will say is advocate. If you hear something, be an advocate for working class people, however that looks. If you want to go, if you get in front of your city council and talk about, you know, this town, like Middletown's a working class town, but somehow we can't get anything done. So get involved. That's the best thing. And educate yourself as well about working class people. Talk to people, get their stories. That's all I can say about that.
That's such a good one, Corey. Talk to people, have respect for people. I would say, coming back to your question, like, what can people do who are in the elites? So in the book, there are actually the first half of the book is stories like Corey's, and the second half is totally nonpartisan policy proposals. There's 6 or 7, and that could be enacted tomorrow that would immediately improve the quality of life for working class people. So there's a list there, but I will say, just sort of, I think each of us, every moment of every day, whether we're consuming media or on social media, like, what we can do is not allow the fiction of our economic self-interests to be given to us, laundered to us as a moral high ground. So that's what's happening, is our economic interests have been laundered to us by millionaires on cable news as morality, or as actually a moral high ground, and the other side is bad and evil, when the other side is actually struggling and we're quite comfortable. And that situation is something we can combat every single day by doing exactly what you're doing here, which is refusing to demonize the other side. And of course, obviously, I'm struggling with this too, which is, by the way, why it was so important for me to be here last night during the debate party, and just so important to be with people who I know are coming in good faith and don't necessarily agree with me. Like, that's the most important thing you can do, and you guys are already doing it. And I would just say, like, keeping that mentality alive in your day-to-day work, talking to people, respecting where people are coming from, especially people who have less than us. You're already, like, ahead of the game.
Wonderful. Well, just a note here as we finish. I'm going to ask our speakers if you would like to talk with them. There's a vestibule over here to the left side. There's going to be some preparation for the next plenary happening here. So if 3 of you could, and anyone who wants to speak with them, go out and have those conversations in the vestibule right over here to the left. A thank you to our speakers.